He's our new defensive coordinator, assistant head coach for defense. I don't know if you know him.
Is that what I am?
These
titles confuse me.
Is it a faux pas when writing?
I think you'd be okay. Coach, you can go ahead and say what you want.
Yes, awesome. Great to be here, and beautiful day out. I'm glad you guys are here, and I'm sure that this is a wrap-up to spring ball. I'll kind of just give you an overall opening statement with just kind of collective thoughts about spring ball. We've had a little bit of a chance to breathe and review it. I feel like we made some strides defensively with some things that we tried to get accomplished. Our main goals going into spring ball was pretty simple. I'm a simple guy, and I think, defense still boils down to fundamentals. So that was just a huge part of our focus, right? Tackling in open space, striking blocks defensively, which creates a mentality of being physical, but striking blocks, getting off blocks, tackling in open space, and then one of the main emphasis that we all really zeroed in on from the front all the way to the back is communication. Communication is huge, and the lack of communication is huge. And a lot of times when you see breakdowns on defense, it's contributed to communication issues. So we focused a lot on those things, but really it was about the fundamentals of spring ball. Building a base defense, knowing situationally what we call, why we call it, and when we're going to call it. And so that was kind of the lion's share of what we tried to get accomplished. We were good some days. Some days we weren't so good. We were a little bit inconsistent, but that, I think, comes with new, philosophies and new verbiage and just, the newness of everything. But overall, I will say this. I'm extremely pleased with the guys. They are 100% all in. The kids, they practiced their tail off for 15 days. Never had a bad day. They came to work every day. So philosophically, all the defensive stuff will get there eventually with what we're trying to do. But as long as they are all in, which I was very proud of them because they are, I think we can continue to build and make some strides.
Players all said that the simplification of things versus what they were doing before was in communication and just basic responsibilities. Did you see them embrace that very quickly and kind of be able to morph into what you want to do a little bit quicker because there's kind of less dangling stuff there?
Yeah, I think going back to the kind of the thing I said originally, the communication gap in anything, right? If you're bad in business, if you're bad in your family, if you're bad in a relationship, if you're bad in anything, it usually comes down to communication. I mean, it just does, right? That's kind of the fall of mankind. When things don't go well, it's because there's probably a communication gap in there somewhere. So when we first came, we felt like the communication, particularly on the back end in the secondary, was a place we really needed to emphasize and really make a lot of strides. And early on, I think they were not really understanding exactly what we were wanting in terms of not only how often the communication was, but how demonstrative it needs to be when you're playing in front of all these people, for everybody from one side of the field to the other side of the field, from the front to the back, to be able to communicate and actually know what each other's saying. It's one thing to give a hand signal and to communicate, but like other dudes got to know it. So at first they were, probably a little bit unsure of what we wanted. But boy, when it really started to take off about practice 5 and 6 and 7 with a communication, in both meetings and on the field, I think it took off, and I think they feel comfortable with it. They understand it's a necessary part of being, where you want to be defensively. There's no way you can be good without it. And I think it really, I was very proud of the way, they embraced it and got better with it in 15 practices, a lot better.
Staying on that, when the communication is in sync and everybody's on the same page before the ball snapped, is there a measurable as far as how quickly they get off the snap and they're in position to make a play versus when there is some confusion at
Well, usually when there's confusion at the point of when the ball is snapped, you see it quick. It's fast. I mean, receivers are running open, and it's not just in the secondary. I mean, because the linebackers have to know it, and everything's coordinated with the defensive line as well. But yes, you can see it pretty quick when the communication isn't there. That jumps out at you on the film. I think the great thing about our guys was that it was not just pre-snap communication that they really improved on. There's a lot of things that our offense does that strains defenses, and a lot of that happens post-snap as well, where you have to see and communicate and point things out. One of the things that we like to do for the players is that when the ball is snapped post-snap, part of the communication process, because we can't hear them when we watch the film, but we can see them point at it. So if they're trying to communicate post-snap and we see them point, that means that there was some sort of post-snap communication going on as well. So that tells us that they saw it, they recognized it, they pointed it out, which means more than likely they were actually communicating it with their buddy. So it's not just pre-snap, it's post-snap as well. And I think they really, really learned a great deal of defense because it's not about the volume of defense. It's about whatever defense you're running within that defense, executing everything well at that point. And so we didn't have a lot of defense. We had several concepts that we built that you can then take the defense and do a lot of different things within those concepts, but we didn't do anything with rote memory. So nothing was rote memorized. It was, here's the concept, this is what the concept is, this is how we play it. These are all the communication things that have to happen within these concepts. And we only gave them a few of those, but within those requires a good amount of communication. So that's probably a lot longer question, a lot longer answer than you wanted, but that's kind of where I feel like improved.
At what point on film did you kind of start seeing them point things out, maybe see that communication kind of start to get into spring practice?
Probably about halfway through spring ball, probably around practice 8 and 9, because it requires you doing it in the meeting room before you go out, and we make them talk in the meetings. Meetings aren't one-sided. So like we don't sit there and monopolize the meeting room. We make them verbalize and communicate back to us what they're seeing, what their responsibilities are, what their communication process is. So it was probably a little bit different for them at first. A lot of times people have meetings and players don't say anything in the meetings. That's not the way we do it. It's interactive learning. And so I think as the practices went on and the meetings went on and the teaching went on, I feel like that's where we really started to see some progress, about halfway through.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2015, when you came back, became the first time, it seemed as though there was a slow build in terms of scheme implementation. You gave the guys just enough that they could handle, knowing that maybe the next year, 2016, you can add more to it. Do you anticipate a similar process here this time?
I do. Just simply because I think we've got really good players on defense, and I think so much of the game these days have turned into let me out-scheme you. Offenses have become really, really good and really, really smart and really, really execution-wise, starting to execute at a very high level. And so we have to be able to just take our talent, make sure they're in the right spots, make sure there's no confusion, and let them play. So that's where we'll start. And I feel like, again, that's what we did in the spring. And when we're ready to build to the next thing, we will. But until then, we need to keep, these building blocks simple and small and kind of go from there.
Coach, how's it been working with Travis Shaw this spring?
Awesome. I love Travis Shaw. I'm really impressed with him as a young man. I think he's mature beyond his ages, or beyond his age, to be honest with you. He's a guy that understands that, you know, as highly recruited as he is, he's got a lot of work to do to be where he needs to be a productive player for us. But he did everything we asked him to do. He understands defense. He's smart. When he decides to turn it on and go, he's pretty hard to stop. So I was very, very impressed with his progress from day 1 to day 15. Like everybody else, he's got a long way to go, but he's really fun to work with. He's got a great personality. He wants to be really good at football, and he is humble. He's humble. He knows he's got work to do, and he's willing to put in the work. So he's been great. I've loved working with him.
Come in, you didn't recruit Travis Shaw, so what's it like to come in and meet him right away and try to build that relationship as fast as possible? Since he is such a talented player, and he's also trying to earn his time and things like that. What's that like?
It's the same with everybody. I mean, I'm trying to learn them all, right? I mean, I love that part of it. I mean, you know, me trying to establish relationships with these guys, that's one of the reasons I came back to do this, right? It's really important to me that I have a relationship with all the players. We speak truth to them, so we'll always do that in terms of where they are versus where they need to be. But part of building trust and building relationships is truth, right? That's what we have to do. So with all of these guys, we speak truth to them on where they, you know, where they need to be. But establishing those relationships is really fun for me. That's the great part of this job. So it's not just Travis. You know, there's so many other guys that I've had a blast being around. This is one of the funnest springs I've had, simply just getting to know these guys, getting to know, you know, what they want to be, how good do they want to be, and they do. They want to be really good. But it's been fun just getting to know these guys and looking forward to getting to know them even better.
Coach, what has it been like getting back? You kind of led to this question, getting back and coaching for 5 years. What's it been like back in Carolina? What has changed with the players, the offense, the defense?
Yeah, it's really been a whirlwind for me. I'm going to be honest. You know, when I came here the last time, I had sat out and done TV for 2 years, and that was tough. So now you're looking at 2.5 times that, right? I mean, it was a huge undertaking for me personally. Not just just relearning the game, relearning the players, relearning and going back and really philosophically digging down to what I really believe in. You know what I mean? Where did I want to start? I've done TV for so many years that, you know, I saw things from a 10,000-foot perspective, and now I had to dive back into, you know, I always said when I was doing TV, if I went back and did this again as a defensive coordinator, what would be the important nuggets that I would have to pour in to a defense that needed change? And so I really had to kind of dig down and figure out what that was. And it all came back down to the same thing. You know, the roots that I believed in for 30 years are the same ones now. But the game has changed in 5 years. So that was a huge undertaking. And now I'm coaching a position along with, you know, overseeing everything. So that was different for me. And I've had a blast, but I've had a lot of 3 and 4 hours sleep nights, just trying to get ready and trying to prepare and making sure that I'm prepared to give these guys the best we can give them. And so, go ahead.
Are you completely moved to Chapel Hill, or are you splitting time there?
In flux. No, we're not splitting time. No, we're here. Right now, we're in the process of trying to buy. So market's not very friendly right now.
When you had
It's hard to
that
find a
10,000
place.
with you and you were thinking about what you might do, did you kind of know that you would probably jump at an opportunity, the right opportunity at some point? Or was that something that really wasn't totally on your radar maybe until you started talking to Mac a few months ago?
You know, I'm always a guy who, wherever my feet are at that moment, that's where I'm at. And, you know, I just believe God's always had a plan for me, and whatever that looked like, I didn't always try to project that. What I did know was that I had one more run in me if the right thing came along and I wanted to do it. I was running out of time, but I knew I had another run in me. And out of all the people that reached out over the last several years, if I was going to go back and be an assistant again, it 100% had to be with the right guy, at the right place. I'm just at a point in my career where I could be very choosy, right? So as luck would have it, the last 2 stints would be here. Larry was a good friend of mine, and I loved Chapel Hill for 2 years that I was here. Matt has always been a great friend of mine, total respect. An opportunity to work back with him again made total sense. So everything just made sense, but did I say, I'm definitely doing this again? No, I did not say that. My life was great, so I don't have to say that. Usually when you're looking for the next thing, you want the next thing because your life isn't great, but my life was great. So I wasn't looking for the next thing. However, when this call was made, it made total sense, complete peace for me. And looking back, I'm still thrilled.
Coach, on the field, how does a jack linebacker differ from the defensive? Like, what's the role difference between the jack and the defensive end? And also, what are some of the physical characteristics you look for that separates a jack from a defensive end?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of similarities to the 2 positions. Sometimes they can have their hand in the dirt. Sometimes they can be standing up. One of the things that we really kind of require at that position is to have a pass rush trait. That's one of the main events with that position. We really feel like, you know, we don't want to have to pressure with 5 and 6 guys every time, you know, we want to, you know, pressure the quarterback. So that pass rush trait in that position is huge. They have to have the ability to play in space if, in the event we did drop them into coverage, which is rare, but we do that. And then they have to be physical at the point of attack. They got to be able to take on 330-pound tackles. And so it's very similar to the defensive end position, but we require a few more things in coverage than that position normally would entail. And so big, you know, long, athletic edge guys that can rush the passer is pretty much the main trait that we're looking for when we recruit that position.
Gene, Mac mentioned several times that nickel is the star position on your defense. He kept using the word star. Do you have a star for that position, and how has it been just going about trying to identify who you might want to plug in there and turn loose?
Yeah, so DeAndre and Obi worked mainly at star for the lion's share of the spring. You know, what got a little bit hard for us was that we had so many DBs that we would like to play and experiment and see who could play that position, but so many of them weren't practicing this spring, and if they were, they didn't get in until very late in the spring. So we've kind of, you know, we know going into the fall, we've opened up some new possibilities to that position. But DeAndre and Obi did a nice job this spring. They took the lion's shares of the reps at the nickel position. And so, look, we're always going to look to see what we can upgrade if we can. But, you know, we're very satisfied with where those 2 guys are at. And with some new guys coming that are going to be healthy in the fall, we'll throw some other guys in there. But it's a key spot for this defense and what we're trying to do. If you remember when I was here before, our star was MJ Stewart. And as you know, his productivity and what he did brought a lot to our defense. So in your mind, when you look at, you know, this star position, you know, we would like to get an MJ Stewart kind of guy at that position, whoever fits that bill. But that'll kind of give you an idea of what that position entails.
Gene, you were able to watch the evolution of name, image, and likeness from the analyst chair. Curious now, you're back in coaching. What are your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting phenomenon. There's certainly some things that we have to, as college football people, need to wrap our minds and arms around in terms of, you know, giving some guidelines to it and more guidelines to it. I think they're all trying to, you know, work to a point where it all makes sense, because there's a lot of things right now about it that I think people still have questions about, including myself. I think, there can be some good things to it if we kind of tweak and massage it a little bit and get it under the right guidelines and parameters. Right now, it's a little wild out there, and I think, there's a lot of people that don't really understand it. You see all these numbers that everybody's throwing around, and people are going, now, is that just what they're going to make? And there's a lot of people that are throwing numbers around that aren't true. I mean, there's all kinds of things, because you know how recruiting goes, right? Everybody's going to try to sell a good pitch. But it's, I'm still learning about it. It's definitely interesting, but I feel like there's a lot of things we need to rein in about it.
You think great defenses, you think places like the SEC, where you were obviously, you don't necessarily think North Carolina and the ACC. So why is it a challenge to maybe build a great offense in this, great defense in this conference, and can you do it here?
I think you can do it here for sure. I think the recruiting base and what Coach has done, prior to me coming here, I think has definitely put us on the way. Our charge is to have great defense here, not good, but great. I think this league, as I'm looking at it now, and I'm looking kind of the way it's evolved, even since I left, it's an RPO league, it's a tempo league, it's a league that strains defenses just from structural, things that are disadvantageous to defense, right? I mean, anytime you're throwing tempo and you're throwing RPOs and there's just a lot of things offensively, quarterback run game involved in there, that can get you down in numbers, can get you, kind of discombobulated in terms of alignments, things of that nature. That strains defenses. You don't see that in the NFL. You don't see tempo. You don't see a lot of quarterback runs. You see some. You're starting to see a little more RPOs and things of that nature, but those things strain defenses. And, in college, this league has become a good bit of that. So to answer your question, we need the right players to be great on defense. We're definitely working in that direction, and that's our charge, right? We want to be great here. We feel like we can be great here. It'll take time to get us to that point, but I feel like the players that we've got are going to allow us an opportunity to get there, and we need to continue to recruit the ones that are going to continue to give us a chance to get there, but it certainly can be done.
You mentioned Travis Shaw took a big jump from the first practice to the 15th. What other players do you think made a drastic improvement from what you saw on tape, or what you saw the first early in the spring to where they are now, or where they will be?
I think if you're talking about young guys, Malachi Hamrick is another guy that really popped up as a player that at the beginning of spring, was just trying to figure it all out. Another guy that should be in high school right now. And then all of a sudden by, practice 12 and 13 and 14, the lights started to come on, and he started to show some flashes of being a really, really good player potentially down the road. I think if you're looking at, older guys that have been here, Miles Murphy had a really, really good spring. I feel like Noah Taylor is really going to be a great addition to this football team. Power Eccles and Cedric Gray every day came to work, and they worked and improved and really, learned, started to learn the defense and the ins and outs of it. Sebastian Cheeks is another young guy who came in. That's a third young guy that, and I'll probably forget one, but it just jumped out when I was thinking about the linebackers. He really, really progressed well from practice 1 to 15. Even Ra-Ra. I mean, our linebacker group, we got to play 4 linebackers, and Ra-Ra Dilworth, I thought he made some strides. He's got a great trait in terms of speed and being able to play outside of the box. Now he's got to learn to play inside the box. And then secondary, Dante Balfour, another young guy, I thought had a really nice spring. He really progressed well. Defensive line-wise, I thought, KJ Hester really, really was solid. Javari Ritzie, really, really solid. Des Evans came on and really started getting some production points there, the last, week and a half of spring practice. So God, I hate to keep naming names, but, there were some guys that really jumped up and we kept production every day. Who produced, who created negative plays, who got tackles for losses, who got sacks, who got picks. That was a huge emphasis on what we were trying to do, right? And there was a lot of guys that were in the running for those production points every day. And sometimes it was a D lineman, sometimes it was a guy in the secondary, or linebacker. But overall, I think everybody really progressed, but with a long way to go. But some of those guys that I just mentioned really jumped out.
Hey,
Guys, do you need?
Andrew, hang on a second. To that, someone from the Zoom asked if you could comment on Desmond Evans and his potential, what we're kind of talking about.
Okay. Yeah, so I was really proud of Des. I thought he did some good things. We kept him at one position, didn't move him around, let him zero in on his job, which was one of 3 or 4 things, and that was it. And I think he definitely I think he prospered from that. And so as the spring went on, I think you saw him start to produce, start to get some sacks, start to get some tackles for loss. What Des has to do is focus and concentrate on execution of the defense when we call it. And, he's a talented young man and really proud of his work ethic and how he, bought in and did what we asked him to do. But I think the next step for him is understanding where he fits in the defense and being more consistent in those fits.
Regarding the defensive line, how many guys do you need to be ready to go on the 27th for an AM game? And are you close to having that number, especially given the fact you got quite a few young guys?
Yeah, we got quite a few young guys in there. It was really, really good to watch the defensive line evolve because, as I told them in the first team defensive meeting, if we don't have a defensive line, we don't have a defense. It's that simple. Our goal is to have 8 guys ready to go so that if we want to say in the 3rd series, I don't care what's happening in the game, we can wholesale flip 4 new guys in there. That's our goal, right? And we talked about defensively us being able to play 22, not lip service. I'm talking 22 dudes that when we put them in there, there's not a drop-off between the 1s and the 2s. We have 22 starters. And if you look at the defensive line as that example, we certainly can do that. And I feel like, with the emergence of some young guys, with the emergence of some guys coming back that weren't in spring practice, that will be coming back in the fall, we should be able to do that on the defensive line. And I'm talking about at least 8. At least 8. But that's where it all starts.
You mentioned you didn't have some guys this spring that contributed on the defense, came right, Jacarius Conley, Matt mentioned, Katie when we ready, but Jacarius might not. Just what's the challenge and what's the process of working with those guys moving forward? How did you work with them in the spring, and how do you plan on working with them in the offseason to get them ready to be some of those 22 guys as they were some of the better players in the defense last year?
Well, they were in all the meetings. They were in all the walkthroughs. They were out at practice taking valuable mental reps. That's all really you can do with them. They were seeing every practice. We sent every practice to them, on top of them sitting in those meetings. So you hope that just being around it and look, any of these guys that weren't participating, anytime they wanted extra meeting time or whatever, we were all willing to meet with them and do whatever we need to do to get them ready, because we do know that there's going to be some significant contributors that weren't there with us in the spring. But short of that, that's where they gotta, if football means a lot to them, that's where they gotta do their part. They gotta come up here. They gotta watch film. They gotta be the ones that are proactive, And I thought it was really cool because a lot of the older guys that weren't practicing, they were really engaged in practice coaching the younger ones. And that's always a really, really good sign. So, but I was pleased with the guys that weren't practicing because they were 100% involved and engaged in every practice.
When we're about position changes, and you have these new positions, defensive end becomes more prominent, the jack. What is it like discussing with a player, a position move, and you have guys who are recruited for certain positions, maybe that position doesn't exist anymore? Is that like kind of finding a spot for a person and navigating the process of finding a place to be?
Yeah, it's kind of challenging at times because, you know, if you're loaded up at one position, but you know that player's a really good player and he can bring value to the defense, where do we put him where he's still competing for a job and still going to give us valuable reps? A lot of those questions are guys that did not practice in the spring, so we don't really know what they look like other than looking at the film from last year. So the challenge really is going to lie more in preseason, right? Where do these guys fit? They missed out on all the spring reps, which is no fault of theirs. But when they come in and they start competing for a job and you have 29 days to win a job, you know, what is that going to look like? So that's a little challenging. We feel like we have good spots for everybody. We feel like we're on target with everything. And now it's really just going to be a matter of those guys coming in and, you know, competing with guys that have done it for 15 days. And, you know, we're going to obviously always play the best guys, the guys that give us the best chance to win. And hopefully we can play more than one at every position and have two. I always call them a pair and a spare. You want two, and then you want a guy after that as well at every position that you can, you know, that you have. So it's on them to, when they come in, ramp it up in the fall and earn playing time.
You guys good?
Awesome, guys and ladies. Thank y'all. Bye-bye, guys. Thanks, y'all.